The Big Ten has some of the most impressive freshmen in the country. My question, who's top dog?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Happy Thursday. Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. It's the only daily national college hoop show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shader, joining me at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you so much for making us your first listen or watch. Want to remind you, you can catch every episode ad-free on Amazon Music. Special shout out to all the everydayers joining us and all the members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord community. Welcome in. Let's get after it. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Coming up on the show today, guys, we've got a first-time guest with us. Hard to believe. Miss Kylen Mills, sports broadcaster, play-by-play analyst, sideline reporter, host, jack of all trades, Renaissance woman. Yes. This lady does it all, works at Big Ten Network, just started full-time, but also with NWSL and ACC on seat, all sorts of stuff. It's crazy. And look, Kylen Mills, not just a question asker. This woman is a certified ball knower. And we're going all in on the Big Ten today. I've got just a whole host of questions. There's not really much action going on last night to recap or to prep for tonight. So it's a great day to zoom out a little bit and just talk Big Ten. We do have one good game tonight, Iowa State and Iowa. Make sure you check in on that. So we're going to go big picture on the Big Ten in the first couple segments, and then we're just going to ask Kylen to take us behind the scenes a little bit behind the Big Ten Network and look into all that. Kylen, the Big Ten. Yes, those are
very
our names.
dramatic.
It was. Hello, Kylen.
Yeah.
There we go. The Big Ten, legitimately, I said off the top, has been unbelievable with the number of freshmen that are contributing at a massive level right here at the beginning of the season. Jeff Borzello from ESPN, in fact, just published an article on Wednesday detailing his top 10 freshmen in America. Cooper Flagg at Duke is number one on that list, but the rest of the top five were all Big Ten players. I don't want to spoil names because I want you to pick out who you think right now is the top dog freshman in this Big Ten conference.
First of all, thank you for having me. I'm glad that we can finally do this, and I'm so excited to talk Big Ten basketball because I have so many thoughts from watching the non-conference and now the early conference portion of the season. I think, and I've talked about this a ton with our analysts, I think this might be, it's definitely up there for the best freshman class the Big Ten has ever had. I mean, it is insane how loaded this conference is with talent. You've got 4 first-rounders for sure. Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, Derek Queen, and Kasparas Yakuchonis. Those are like my big 4. That's like my Mount Rushmore. There are definitely some others that are in the mix, but I think those 4 to me stick out above the rest. As far as the best, Dylan Harper has lived up to the billing. There was all of the hype going into his freshman season at Rutgers, and everything I've seen from him has absolutely lived up to the hype. He is an incredible playmaker. His decision-making is excellent. He can get to the bucket in a hurry. And I want to tease ahead because I know something you were going to ask me about is one of the best individual performances. I mean, Dylan Harper is a bucket, and some of the things he's done against some of the best teams in the country has been outstanding. Dylan Harper averaging more than 23 points per game, 3rd in the country, Isaac. 3rd in the country. Dylan Harper, a freshman. To me, there's no questions asked. He is the best freshman. And I get Cooper Flagg, getting that, he's going to be the first round pick. I don't know. I think Dylan Harper is right there with him.
He absolutely is. And as somebody who covers the ACC a lot more, I'm with you. Like, Cooper Flagg is more of the, like, he's not the guy that's going to go get his own bucket in the same way that Dylan Harper is.
Dylan Harper is, yeah. 100%.
And that's where Harper outshines Cooper Flagg. And I'm not belittling Cooper Flagg at all. His all around game is phenomenal. Yeah. And he's impacting Duke and the rest of the ACC in a big way. But man, Dylan Harper has it. And I love your point there, Kylen, about with Harper and with Bailey, they already had so much hype coming in as top 2-3 guys in this class. Whereas like Derek Queen was high, but a little lower than those guys. Same with the Yakuchonis. Sure. And so they've kind of been a surprise for some people in some ways, but I love it when guys have the expectations and they meet or exceed that ceiling. So I'm right with you. and I love that. I'm curious, you mentioned you guys have been having conversations about some of the other best freshman classes ever in the Big Ten. Do any come to mind of who y'all have talked about with that?
I mean, no, I literally was talking to Jordan Taylor, who's a former Badger and has played overseas. We were on the show last night, and that's what he exactly was saying, though. He's like, I can't think of a freshman class that was as good as this current freshman class. And you even look back, and the Big Ten has not in the last decade, especially, had historically top 10 picks, first round NBA draft picks. Like, it just hasn't been great in terms of a league producing professionals, and especially professionals that go one and done. You see it a lot in the SEC, maybe more in the ACC, but not as much in the Big Ten. So I think this is a unique class for this conference. And, credit to the coaches for doing an excellent job bringing in these top in the country recruits.
And it's not even just with the West Coast schools coming in. All four of those guys you mentioned are from existing Big Ten schools, and I love that.
Yeah.
Kylen, let's go to some more superlatives that I've teed up for you here. I want you to give me your biggest surprise team, like in a good way so far.
So I have a couple. So unfortunately, I narrowed it down, but I can't give you one. There's a couple.
Fine. That's fine.
First of all, Michigan. You have to give credit to Dusty May. Typically, you temper expectations a little bit in year one, brand new head coach, totally new roster. Yes, he did incredible things at FAU, but can he do it again and do it that quickly at a power conference level? The top 25 upsets that the Wolverines have pulled off, especially early on in the season, when you're still trying to form an identity with brand new players under a new head coach, have caught a lot of people by surprise. They move the ball well. They've been shooting the ball pretty well. They play at a nice pace. And that's something he kind of may mention even when coming in, that he wanted to carry over some of the free-flowing offense that he had at FAU. And I think it has worked so far. Turnovers, the Achilles heel. So I know this maybe isn't a great day to bring this up after they just lost to Arkansas, a tight one earlier this week. But that's also a quality Arkansas squad, although they've dropped out of the top 25. I just think that year one, under a first-year head coach with brand new players, this Michigan team has raised a lot of eyebrows. Another team I wanted to bring up is Oregon. They jumped from unranked to 12th in the country, largest jump in program history for good reason. Dana Altman, I think, is an excellent coach. 5 players in double figures they're averaging, a well-balanced offense. They're a complete team. They're like solid defensively, solid offensively, pretty good rebounding team. They don't turn it over too much. Like, to me, they're just a good, complete package. Yes, I think they were expected to be a pretty good team, but I think they've overperformed expectations in terms of being able to get off to this undefeated start before dropping that wild finish to UCLA. So once again, maybe this is a bad time to be bringing up 2 schools coming off losses, but that UCLA game, the bank being open the last second, I mean, you could chalk that up to late game execution. You could chalk it up to a little bit of luck. I still think this Ducks squad could very well be contenders in the Big Ten title race. Another team that I wanted to mention is Maryland. They were picked to finish 10th in the Big Ten, and I think they could be much closer to the top. Derek Queen, we already mentioned him. He's one who I don't think was on as many radars because of Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, and he has been a pleasant surprise. Derek Queen with Julian Reese in the front court have to be one of the most formidable front court duos in the Big Ten. I like Jacoby Gillespie. I think he's been a really nice addition from Belmont. If Selton Miguel can keep hitting from beyond the arc, they've been knocking down the 3 ball a little bit better here during this last stretch to get some balance in their offense, in addition to that front court combo that can score inside and get it done down low. So I think this Maryland team could surprise some folks as well. Once again, picked to finish 10th. I think they're better than that. And then one last one, I guess, can I have an honorable mention selection as well? Penn State was picked to finish 17th in the Big Ten. I think that is an atrocity. The Nittany Lions under Mike Rhodes have been a very fun team to watch. I personally enjoy the style, 40 minutes of pressing, pushing the pace, turning teams over, getting out in transition. I enjoy it. It's very disruptive. I think it's really difficult for top teams to handle, as we saw with what happened in the upset against Purdue. And that's a team that I just cannot believe was picked to finish 17th, Isaac. 17th.
Unreal.
And they returned a lot of talent from last year. So I don't know.
Did you see, by the way, going back to the Michigan-Arkansas game, did you see Juwan Howard was at MSG for that game, like basically right across from the Michigan bench?
I saw that. Awkward. Yeah.
Yes.
And interesting dynamic there now. As someone who was scorned as a coach, but still did have that celebrated career as a player. But I did see that.
Let's go to the opposite side. I've got my team that I think I would pick for this, but who is your biggest letdown in the Big Ten so far?
This one's a little bit tougher. I will say, for me, I think to where we're at right now, Rutgers was a surprise during this last stretch of games in terms of prior to the last win, and it was a good win earlier this week, but dropping 4 of 5, Kennesaw State, Alabama and Texas A&M, two good teams they fell to, and then falling pretty decisively to Ohio State. The Scarlet Knights came in as a preseason top 25 team because obviously they have two NBA players on this team. I'm sorry, but Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey have no problem adjusting. They're physical specimen. They're athletic. Love everything about their game. So there's a good reason why they were a hyped up team coming into the season. What we saw during that stretch before this last win over Penn State, which they gritted out, was a tight one. I think was a little bit of a disappointment, but I do think with some of the new pieces, the younger pieces, a lot of teams are still just trying to figure out and get things together. The Scarlet Knights have not put it all together yet, but they very well could as the season progresses.
Love it. Kylen,
who's your team though? I want to know, because
I was going to say the Hoosiers, Indiana.
Okay. That was my second pick. That was my second pick for sure.
To be fair, it's just 2 losses. Louisville and Gonzaga. So that's the thing. And Gonzaga, for me, is a top 5 team. I know they've lost these 2 games now to Kentucky and to West Virginia. And Louisville, that was prior to Case and Pryor getting hurt, if I remember correctly, as part of Battle for Atlantis there. And so a better Louisville team, but I feel like they got it. Now, again, to be fair, Indiana's 8-2, and I think maybe we dumped on them because it was 2 straight losses there at Battle for Atlantis. Right. So, maybe I'll hold on them instead of let down. But yeah, Mike Woodson needs bigger things, or that hot seat could continue to get warm. Kylen, biggest individual, we talk surprise team, maybe an individual player that has been a pleasant surprise to you.
I teased, an individual player or individual performance, because I've got a good performance in mind. For a player, I'll give you my player. First of all, I think my player has to be John Tonje, Wisconsin's big playmaking wing. You just didn't really know what to expect for a player who was coming off an injury-riddled season. He's bounced around at a couple of schools, was at Colorado State, was at Missouri. Once again, didn't play, I think, just a couple of games last season. So, who knows what you're getting. But his averages this season are just, out the yard, averaging more than 20 points per game, right around 21 points per game. Great shooting numbers too. So well outperforming any of his previous career stats. And then coming off an injured season, you just don't know what you're going to get. I was and have been really pleasantly surprised by John Tonje's playmaking abilities. He's a player who can get a bucket, can score in a variety of ways. He's one that I think has been a big surprise for me.
I love that. And then go on to that individual performance you mentioned. You got one.
Well, yeah. I mean, this one, I don't know if it's obvious, but for me, it's the 37-point outburst from Dylan Harper against a top 10 Alabama team. The Crimson Tide have been ranked the top team in the country at times early on in the season. And Dylan Harper put up 37 points without scoring a 3. You realize how ridiculous that is? Without scoring a 3. He went 15 of 16 from the free throw line in that game, I remember. Can get downhill in a hurry, plays through contact, not afraid to shy away from those tough buckets inside. I mean, my goodness, to put up 37 on a top 10 team in the country as a freshman in your first month of playing collegiate basketball without shooting a 3, that blew my mind. Watched that game from start to finish, blew my mind. I was like, okay, this dude is the real deal. He's a bucket.
And Nate Oates came away from that game like singing his praises. And Nate Oates, widely now recognized as one of the hot upcoming coaches in the sport. Kylen, last question before we move on. If we were choosing first team All Big Ten today, voting on it today, not projecting ahead, only 5, none of this like what the Pac-12 always did, putting 37 people on their first team. I need 5 dudes you would put on your All Big Ten first team right now.
This was the one question, because you obviously, like a responsible producer, gave me a heads up of what we were going to be talking about. And this is the one that I'm like, I hate doing end of season predictions when it comes to picking teams I think could be contenders. And I hate doing like just any kind of player list. I'm the worst about that. But I will say, I think Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey are for sure on for me in terms of like a first team All Big Ten. I'm also leaning towards John Tonje being a wing on that list. I think Trey Kaufman-Renton has earned a spot. I mean, he's fantastic. But then you also bring up Braden Smith. Like, how do you leave Braden Smith off that when you're looking at this Purdue team? And then Ace Bailey's another one. So see, here's where mine's going to be like a 27-player list. But those are a couple guys that come to the top of mind right off the bat. I mean, I think if I had to pick 6, maybe that'll be my 6. Dylan Harper, John Tonje, I think Ace Bailey. I like Ace Baldwin Jr. I mean, to lead the conference in steals, but then also do what he does in terms of assists. He's scoring the basketball. Like, I think you got to respect what he does defensively. like I said, down low, I think Trey Kaufman-Wren has done a really good job of stepping up and being the interior scorer. Very interesting that Purdue has gone small with him playing at the 5, but he's adjusted well, and that's been a big surprise for me. I'm going to stop there.
Done. Perfect. I love it. Thank you for obliging me, even though you hate it so hard.
I know. I literally was like, I'm not going to make my list. I'm just going to make it up on the spot because I just have a hard time.
I'm so proud of you. Look, we are one game shy of every Big Ten team playing 2 conference games already. So my next question for Kylen coming up here in just a second. What have we already learned? And Oregon slides right in, wins the Big Ten in football. Can they double dip in basketball as well? All that coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about Game Time, college basketball season is here, and there is absolutely nothing better than the atmosphere of a college basketball game. The anticipation of what might happen in this Big Ten. Who even knows, man? It's already crazy. So many teams sitting at 1-1 right now. The good news is that Game Time has a new feature called Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite team even easier. Game Time Picks, what it does is it filters out all the fluff, so you only see incredible deals on the best seats in the house. And it's not just for basketball, it's for other sports, plus concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. So whether it's Game Time ticket coverage, the lowest price guarantee, or panoramic views from your seat right there in the app, Game Time has got you covered. How about that Indiana at Nebraska game Friday night at the bank, Pinnacle Bank Arena? $12 will get you in the door, but you could find yourself in the lower bowl for just $92, man. It's a great deal. Go check it out. Take a date. I don't know, whatever you need to do on Friday night. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? It's game time. Isaac Shade, Kylen Mills coming at you on a Thursday. And as we record, let's timestamp this thing Wednesday afternoon, about 2:41 Eastern Standard Time in the year of our Lord 2024. Other than Indiana and Nebraska, who we just mentioned square off on Friday night, the entire rest of the league has already played 2 conference games. We got 3 teams undefeated. UCLA, thanks to that bank shot Kylen was talking about earlier, both Michigan schools. We got 10 teams that are split at 1-1 and 3 teams 0-2, including 20th ranked Wisconsin, Washington, yikes, and Minnesota. I don't know what's going on with Dawson Garcia's hair, but it's up there. And look, we'll find out about Indiana and Nebraska on Friday night. That game's 8 p.m. Eastern on Fox. Let's be a company people for Kylen there. Kylen, my question to you, so far through not thinking non-con, I'm filtering that out, just these conference games, what do you feel like we've already learned about the Big Ten?
It is a very unique challenge. What I want to start with, having conference play in early December is something we've heard every single coach talk about. It's very different, an 18-team league, and now you got to be ready for what the Big Ten brings. It's especially a big challenge with the way the transfer portal is totally transforming rosters year over year. It's something that I talk about with our analysts. You hear coaches talk about. Like, it's just wild to me to look from a year ago to now. Like, I don't know anyone on this Illinois roster. I mean, you have to start from scratch. Nebraska, who's in their starting lineup? They lost 5 of 7 scores, and, some players, not all transfer portal, but, graduating and things like that. But I'm just saying, with the transfer portal, in addition to players moving on, you just look across the league and so many of these teams are just brand new, top to bottom. Whether it's a new coach or a coach who's been around forever, you're looking at totally new teams. And so the challenge is you need that non-conference time to try to get things together. You're implementing a system. You've got players coming in from all over the country who've done things in different ways. You've got freshmen who are adjusting to the collegiate game, and you've got to try to get all this to come together, play the style of basketball you want them to play. Also, as a coach, you got to tweak some of what you do to the strengths of your players, but you don't really know what you got until you step out there on the floor, as we're talking about a guy like a John Tonje, or players who come in as transfers who were injured, or you get transfers from the mid-major level, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, hey, this guy's the real deal. You just don't really know what to expect until you get the guys out there. And I think it's a big challenge, and something that I've heard at every single press conference from these coaches during these early non-con games. It's really difficult to throw this early on in the season when so many of these teams are starting from square one in October. So it's not a lot of time to, and yes, but you know what I'm saying? It's not a lot of time to build what you want to build and be ready for what Big Ten play brings in the physicality, the competitiveness, And some coaches opt to go tougher in the non-con schedule than others. So maybe they're a little bit more prepared. And that's one thing I will say. I feel like you see the teams do better oftentimes that have prepared themselves with tougher non-conference schedules. So you go and you're playing in Alabama in non-conference, you're playing a good Louisville team in non-conference. You're going to be more prepared for what you're going to see in early December. But I also think that some of the teams that have a little bit more consistency in terms of returning more players. So like a Penn State team to me is one where they returned, I think it was about 60% of their minutes from last year. They were top 3 in the Big Ten in terms of returning players in production. So they maybe have a little bit of a head start early on in the season because they play a very different style of basketball. But when you have more guys who are on the roster who already know what Mike Rhodes is expecting and were in the system a year ago, then you come out maybe a little bit ahead. You look like more of a finished product than even like an Indiana team where you've got a lot of new pieces in the mix. And Mike Woodson, how hot is the hot seat? I don't know, but it's something that he said during those couple of losses is feeling like they just hadn't been able to put it all together. He felt like the defense was lacking in a number of areas, but also the guys were still trying to learn how to play with each other. So I do think it's really hard to try to take a ton away from these early games because I think that it does matter how new the team is, how many new pieces you have in the mix. And so this is something we talk about with our analysts, just like you have to take a little bit of the early results with a grain of salt, because I think we're going to see the cream rise to the top come like late January. But I don't know that these early conference games are a great indicator of where teams are going to finish come the end of the season. Does that make sense?
100% it does. And I'm with you. Like it so much so in all the regards, because it's not just new players coming and going. It's also 4 new teams coming in from the West Coast.
That too.
And like, I know that they weren't forced to travel east for this first set. They were all kind of playing each other, which is helpful. But like, as we get into like the main chunk of Big Ten play, Kylen, later, how difficult do you think this travel is going to be on these schools? Like, how big of an effect will it have on their bottom line, on their win and loss record? I mean, I know it's hard enough just for you guys sitting in the studio staying up that late. How difficult will it be for Oregon and Washington and the 2 LA schools?
I think it's going to be more difficult than ever to win on the road in the Big Ten, because this is already a conference where road venues are so difficult to play. And you've got great environments around the conference, and it's just hard to figure out how to win in an opposing team's gym. By the numbers, the Big Ten is one of the most difficult conferences in terms of getting those road wins in Big Ten play. And now you're adding the travel, you're adding the time differences just from covering some of our fall sports. We heard from a lot of coaches and players talk about it in football. It's very difficult for the body to adjust to a 3-hour time difference. And then if you add in an early tip time, a late tip time, whatever that may be, it's going to be a major challenge. That being said, I think it makes it even more important to guard your yard. Like, you cannot afford to lose home games when you know it's going to be extremely difficult on the road. In addition to the environments in the gym, you're now also battling environmental factors in terms of longer plane rides, longer trips, and a time change that's going to mess with the body and interfere with the typical routines that you have. And that's such an important part of athletes performing at a high level. So I think it's going to be a major challenge. I also think it's going to put even more of an emphasis of winning at home. You have to win home games, and you have to win the games that you're expected to win. So we'll see later on in the season, teams that are at the top, teams that are at the bottom. Like, you have to take care of business. If you're one of those teams that's in contention for the Big Ten title, you've got to win games at home, and you have to be able to take care of the teams that you're expected to take care of, because you're going to drop some on the road. Like, that's the bottom line. And it's been that way already in this conference. And now you add in having to travel cross country. It's just going to make it that much more difficult.
Well, let's bring those things together. One of those West Coast teams who is challenging for the top of the Big Ten, one of your surprise teams, in fact, that you mentioned earlier, Oregon, slid right on into those DMs of the Big Ten and won the whole blessed thing in football, #1 seed in the CFP. Yes or no, Kylen? Oregon will double dip and win not only the Big Ten football championship, but also Big Ten basketball. And I'll even give you regular season or conference tournament.
I am going to say no.
Okay.
I think that Oregon I think they very well could be a top 5-6 team in the Big Ten, but I just think 18 teams, like, statistically even, how difficult is it going to be to win this conference? And then you look at the tournament, 3 games, like, anybody can win 3 games. And that's why watching March Madness is so fun, is that it comes down a lot to matchups in tournaments. And so I think that the Big Ten tournament always a little bit more up in the air. The Big Ten conference winner overall in the season, you see a little bit more of who consistently can put it together. I just think it's going to be so difficult. So it's not necessarily a knock on the Ducks, but I just think there's so many quality teams. I still think this Indiana team, as we already talked about, kind of a disappointment with the 2 early season losses. I could still see them being a contender. You go down the list and there's just so much competition. Here's one thing I do want to say about the conference this year. While the ceiling may not be as high in terms of there being clear top 10, for example, AP ranked teams coming out of the Big Ten, I think the floor is higher as well. So maybe the ceiling comes down, but I think the floor is higher. And that's something that I've also heard across the board from analysts and coaches in this league, is that they do feel like there's going to be even more parity in this conference than before, because there are just so many teams that are going to be good and are going to be competitive, even if there's not maybe those 1 or 2 or 3 top 10 teams in the country. There are a lot of teams. I mean, right now it's like throughout this early portion of the season, 10, 11 that are ranked or receiving votes. Not one in the top 10, but 10 or 11 receiving votes means 10 or 11 very competitive teams out of 18 in this conference. So it's just going to be really, really difficult to win. I like Purdue to be a title contender. I actually think that Maryland could finish in the top 5. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that. I cannot speak highly enough about Derek Queen.
Yes.
I think Oregon will be in the mix. Again, I think Indiana is a team that I do think will figure it out. They've got a ton of talent, and definitely Mike Woodson has to coach his butt off, because I do think the seat is getting hot for him. Wisconsin, a team 0-2. Wisconsin 0-2 in Big Ten play. They've been a top 25 ranked team. Greg Gard knows how to play efficient basketball. Like, they could come out of, you know what I mean? I just think these early season results are so hard to read, but I just think there's so many teams that realistically could be competing for the championship.
Ooh, it is going to be fun, and can't wait till we get to the main chunk of Big Ten action coming up here in just a couple weeks. So Kylen has been so gracious to give us all this time. Now we want to ask her to take us on a little tour of the Big Ten network, a little peek behind the curtain to see what's going on. We'll do all that coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel. Look, get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers, you can bet $5, and if you win, you get $150 back in bonus bets. The FanDuel Sportsbook app, it gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. It's this beautiful one-stop shopping. So maybe you get a hunch. It's the middle of the game. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more right there on that same page where you place your bets. How about some Big Ten regular season odds? Kylen was just walking us through some of her top teams. Michigan is actually the odds-on favorite right now, plus 300, followed by UCLA and Purdue, both at plus 500.
UCLA.
Yes. Michigan State plus 800, Illinois plus 950, and then those Ducks we were just talking about at plus 1,400. Go check it all out at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch, and go make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Kylen, you've recently moved into working full-time at the Big Ten Network, a proud Fox employee. Make sure you, again, see these games on Fox coming up on Friday night. What did we say it was? Indiana at Nebraska. Yes, check it out. So, Kylen, just want to ask you to tour us around a little bit. First off, here's one that I think a lot of people often wonder. We only see just these snippets, pregame, postgame, halftime, all of that. What are you doing in between those times?
So I'll walk you through a day, for example. I'm going in to
it.
host this weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So first of all, my prep starts before that day even gets there. If we have a couple games on our network, for example, or I know I'm doing halftime or pre and post, I'm going through reading both teams' notes. We also have a research team that sends us out detailed notes for all games that are airing on the Big Ten Network. So I make sure I go through, I read those. I'll go through. And then I also have actually running documents in my computer about every single Big Ten team. And as I'm, working a game and notes are coming out and they do something great, and, Michigan lost against Arkansas because they had, a stretch where they had 5 straight possessions where they turned the ball over. I put that and copy and paste it into a running notes page where I have the team's record, different interesting stats that had popped up that week, background information about the head coach, background information about key players, what they did in their last game. And then I'll kind of keep a running tab of different games and what issues came up, which a lot of people that I talk to are kind of surprised. But the next surprising factor is when I go in to do these shows, whether it be a 30-minute tip-off show, halftime, post-game, those are all ad-libbed. We don't have a teleprompter. We don't have scripts, which a lot of people are surprised by. There are some times where we'll have like maybe a specific little reader, like I'm reading something about Purdue's announcing their new head coach. Well, I'll write something down on paper, but like there's no teleprompter for that or anything. So it's pretty much just all conversation and having to know information off the top of your head. For example, if we're doing a halftime show, our like kind of template is that we come in with like a play or a shot or something that happened and I talk over it and I'll be like, hey, Nick Martinelli hits the 3 ball and Northwestern was shooting lights out from beyond the arc 40. Like that's all ad lib. That's all made up on the spot. My producer will let me know ahead of time, hey, we're going to have a Nick Martinelli 3. And I got to be following the game. I got to know who the players are. I got to know what the team is doing. Hey, they're shooting 40% from 3, and that's, 6% above their season average, whatever. So a lot of what I do basically comes in the prep beforehand. Day of, go into the studio, usually 2 to 3 hours before our first show, go over the rundown with my producers, meet with the analysts that are coming in. We'll talk about what they're interested in for that game. So we've got a couple regulars. So Robbie Hummel for folks who watch Fox or the Big Ten Network. He's also on NBC. He's one who I work with a ton. Rafael Davis is a former Purdue and all Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year who's Chicago-based, so he's on a ton. John Beilein, the former Michigan head coach, and then Mike DeCourcy, who's well-known and respected for covering collegiate hoops is another. So those are like 4, for example. So I kind of come in and we'll get a feel for what they want to talk about during the show. Because again, it's all ad-libbed. It's all conversation. It's all on me to know the information ahead of time, to know what they want to talk about, to how to set them up for success. So we'll come in, we'll kind of have those conversations. Like I said, if there are any scripts or little things I need to write, sometimes I'll write teases. So teases are a little section before you go into a commercial break where you're saying, hey, coming up, da-da-da. So sometimes I will write those out and just kind of have that on paper for myself when we're out there, just to remind, myself as to what's coming up in the next segment and make sure I'm on target in terms of teasing the right thing. So I'll do a little bit of writing. We kind of go through the rundown. I'll make sure I have all my notes organized, like which teams we're talking about first. Because another thing that's a challenge about working for a college network is that you might be talking about 8 teams on any given day. You might be talking about 9 teams. Now it's an 18-team conference. You got to be following all 18, and I do both men's and women's. So that means 36 teams that you're trying to keep up with. So for me, it's a lot about, okay, which teams are we talking about? What game are we going to talk about first? Let me get all my notes in order. Okay, here are the interesting things my analysts want to talk about. They feel like 3-point defense hasn't been good. Let me get my stats ready. Let me figure out what these players did in terms of their shooting the last couple of games. So there is a lot of prep work that goes into it that I think people don't realize. So before the games start, that's typically what I'm doing is getting notes organized, going over. We'll have a meeting with the producer and analyst. I'll talk to them and kind of get their pulse on what they like are watching for. And then I watch the game. We have like a green room, which is kind of cool. So we have a little like sitting room, hangout room, whatever it's called, a green room in TV where the analysts will sit. We've got like maybe 12 TVs, 6 TVs. I don't know. Now I might be overshooting that, but we got a bunch of TVs basically where we've got like every college basketball game that's on that day is on every TV. So that we can make sure we're following stuff and not just in the Big Ten, but around the country. So we'll all kind of sit in there and typically we'll have the live stats up as well. Everyone's got it on their computer and we'll kind of talk as the game is going on as to what the big talking points are, what surprised us, who's playing well, who's not playing well. And that kind of leads into when we do our little halftime segments, what the conversation is about. Hey, this team just went on a run. Hey, so-and-so shooting really well. Hey, whatever the main talking point may be, they're, getting on the glass. And then oftentimes in our halftime segments, we'll talk about other games that are going on around the conference or preview upcoming games. So again, it's just super important that I'm basically well-versed and I know a little bit about a lot or a lot about a lot, however you want to look at it. Yeah. So it's just really important to be well educated on every game that's happening that day and kind of what the analysts want to talk about. And then same thing, kind of we'll go back, we'll watch the second half, sit in the green room. I'm usually on my laptop. I'm taking notes. I'm writing down things that are happening. Like I said, following the live stats. Oh, hey, wow. Selton Miguel is 3 for 5. Oh man, I think he's had a pretty slow start to the year. Let me pull up his stats, so you're constantly just kind of looking and following up on things. Oh yeah, the first 6 games, he was shooting 12% from 3. Like, whoa, and then we also have a researcher in the room with us as well. So sorry, this is a long,
it's great.
It's a long day. It's a long dichotomy of what it looks like, but we also will have a researcher who sits in the green room with us as well, who I can ask questions like, hey, what, Selton Miguel, last 3 games versus first 5, what are his shooting splits? And he can look up and find that information for me as well. So it's an ongoing conversation, ongoing research. We're watching, we're taking notes, and we're preparing for what our next segments are to come. So I'll cap it off there, but it is a very interesting and very cool career. I love it. But I think people don't realize how much work goes into actually preparing and needing to know your stuff, because that's the bottom line. My best shows are when I know what I'm talking about and I'm well versed on all the teams. And like I said, that goes into hours of research beforehand.
Man, that's great. I love to know that you guys aren't using prompters or, any of that in those moments. Like, that just makes it
People are
more
surprised.
Yes,
Yeah.
more fun in the organic nature of it. But it's like, just like preparing for so many things, it's like when you get to the moment, the work is done and now you just got to do it. Right.
Yep.
And so
100%. That's being on air pretty much. Like, that's the fun part. That's the fun part.
Exactly.
It's the prep. That's, that's where the dirty work's done.
And now, Kylen, what's even crazier is with these West Coast teams coming in, the days turn into nights and the nights turn into the early mornings, because like, I remember a day last week, it was a weeknight, like a school night. And we had a triple header on Big Ten Network, all of which were like time zone appropriate tip times. Right. Like, and so like, how does that affect y'all's programming at BTN now?
It's definitely been a big change because our shows are going on a lot later. So the last show of the night typically is the big show, and that's kind of a wrap-up show that will cover not just basketball. We'll have our analysts on that and do 1 or 2 segments, but like NCAA volleyball might be going on. We might have women's hoops highlights to show where we kind of wrap up everything. Well, previously, the last game of the night would typically be, like at 8 o'clock Central or Eastern tip. Now we've got 10 o'clock Central Time tips, which are 8 p.m. Pacific time. So like you said, not necessarily inappropriate locally, but that means our show is going on at midnight, 12:30 a.m., both times that I've been on in the last like week or two. So it just means a lot of late nights and sleeping in the next day, which was me. Tuesday night, we had Washington, Eastern Washington. So that tips off at 10 p.m. You just have to pray those games don't go into overtime, I say, just for your own sanity. It's just like, please no. And actually longer than basketball is volleyball. So the Big Ten women's volleyball is extremely strong, but if you get a 5-set match, that can be 3 hours. And Oregon is a really, really good volleyball school. They've been in the top 25 all season, and USC as well. So we've had some of those matches on our network that first serve is at 10 p.m. They might not get done till 1. And same thing with football. So as we're talking about basketball late tips, but like football kickoffs, football games over 3 hours. So we've had a couple that were 8 o'clock Pacific time kicks. That's 10 or 11 p.m. Central or Eastern, where our crew is on the air at 1 a.m. or later, 1:30, getting out at 2, 3 a.m. So it definitely has adjusted the workflow for sure and just moved it back a little bit in terms of the timeline. So it's taken some getting used to. But like I said, I don't set an alarm the next day. Wednesday, I was like, dude, don't wake me up. That's all I said to my husband. Don't wake me up. Don't wake me up tomorrow.
I'll get up when I'm good and ready. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
all right, Kylen, let's wrap. I have 3 quick superlative type questions for you. Here we go. We just finished a couple weeks ago Thanksgiving. Which person, you mentioned all those analysts you work with at the desk. Out of those guys, which one would you most like to have over for Thanksgiving meal?
Okay, so my answer definitely is the former Michigan coach, John Beilein, because getting to work with him a little bit last year and this year, like that guy has stories for days. He has lived a big life. He has coached in all kinds of different scenarios. He has a ton of wisdom and tons of knowledge. Like, you just wouldn't believe some of the stories that he tells. And that's the fun part about sitting in the green room with some of these guys who've been at the top of college coaching or collegiate playing, who've been around the block as TV personalities. So it's very interesting and entertaining. But he's a guy who just, like I said, has stories for days, has personality for days. I could sit there and listen to him through a whole meal, just tell different scenarios that he's been through. So that 100% would be my pick.
I love it. Absolutely. Okay. There are a whole host of characters in the Big Ten coaching stable. Out of them, Kylen, who do you want to paint the town with? Who are you heading out with? Because it's just like, I just want to spend a night hanging out with you.
Oh, you put this one on here and I'm struggling. I don't know. So there is actually, there are a couple coaches I really like from football that I wanted to throw out there. Is Michael Locksley is like one of the coolest and most down-to-earth guys that I covered in football, because I also do football sideline reporting. So this is not along the lines of Locked On College Basketball, but like when I saw that question, he immediately popped to mind because he's just the coolest, most down-to-earth dude. As far as other coaches, I don't know. Do you have a pick? I would say maybe like Tom Izzo. I feel like he kind of has like a low-key wild side.
Yes.
But also like Izzo is a really, really cool, genuine person too. Like if you actually get to talk to him.
That funny enough, that was literally who was rattling around in my head.
Oh, really?
As you asked. Yes. So he's somebody that it's just be like, and honestly, let's transition that into the next question, because I think he would actually be my answer for the next one, which is which Big Ten basketball coach would you like to most just like sit and pick his brain about basketball?
100% Tom Izzo. Izzo, I mean, Hall of Fame coach for good reason. Another guy, like I said, that's the fun part about getting to work with these people and cover these people, just like to hear about the life experiences, the basketball acumen, like after you've been in coaching for decades, like there's just nothing that can replicate that. So 100% Izzo would be my answer for the next one.
Also, I've got a different answer for the painting the town with.
Okay.
I want to ride the Must Bus. Let's get on. Let's get after.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
Now he's a Big Ten guy. It's just like the coaching carousel, the player transfer portal, it gets wild, but 100%. He is as high energy as he looks. Actually, I got to cover him. Arkansas played in the Bay Area in the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 2 years ago, was it? Was it 2022?
Yeah. That sounds right.
Got to cover that in person, though, and he was as high energy and hilarious in person as I thought he was going to be. So that's a great answer.
Yes, I'll take it. Thank you. I appreciate that. I've moved into the question answerer role now, and you should sign off. No, guys. Big thanks to Kylen for joining us. We're going to have to continue to do this with some level of regularity. Kylen giving us all the great Big Ten insight. Thank you so much for your time after a late night, getting up and hanging out and chatting Big Ten college hoops with us.
Thanks for having me. We're definitely going to have to do this again.
100%. Guys, if you have not already subscribed to the show on YouTube and audio, make sure you do so you don't miss a second of Locked On College Basketball. If you've not joined the Locked On College Basketball Discord, man, it's a great place to be where we're chatting college hoops all day long. As always, we got to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wildcats, and until tomorrow when Andy Patton and I get you ready for the weekend. Peace.